You've felt it before. That weird feeling when someone asks you for a small favor. You have every reason to say no. You're busy, you're tired, but you still say yes. And the weird part? This person is never there when you need help. What force makes you ignore what your brain is telling you? What if I told you some people go through life getting help, chances, and resources without ever asking directly, while others, with better skills and bigger needs, get ignored? The difference isn't charm or luck. It's an old understanding of how people work that most never learn about, and it's deciding your future right now. Picture yourself at a party. You see one person easily getting help, attention, and resources without asking. Meanwhile, another person, maybe with better skills and clearer needs, can't get anyone to listen. The first person understands the invisible scorecard. The second doesn't even know it exists. Some people go through life wondering why doors stay closed to them, why no one answers their calls for help, why their talents go unnoticed. They're playing a game no one taught them how to play. Others, a small few, move through the social world knowing about the hidden scorecards in every human interaction. They know exactly when to create small, almost invisible debts, when to call them in, how to build a network of obligations so subtle that people fulfill them thinking it was all their own idea. Stop. Think about the relationships where you always give but rarely get. That's not bad luck. That's not just how things are. That's the invisible scorecard working against you. This isn't about tricking people. It's not about using them. It's about understanding the silent language that has guided human groups since we first gathered around fires and decided who would get the best meat, who would be protected, who would be heard. The question you face now is simple, but will decide your entire life path. Will you stay blind to these invisible scorecards, or will you finally learn to read them? The help you give creates a debt. Are you collecting on it? Think about the last time you really needed help. Maybe during a job change, a personal crisis, or when trying to start a project. You reached out to your network, people you've helped, co-workers you've assisted, friends whose problems you've listened to. And what happened? Silence. Vague promises. I'll get back to you. Let me check my calendar. Sounds good, but I'm really busy right now. The pain isn't just in the rejection, it's in the confusion. The shock of realizing that all the goodwill you thought you'd built means nothing when you finally need to use it. You've been giving without a plan. Others have been taking with a strategy. Meanwhile, you watch as others, sometimes with fewer skills, less experience, weaker connections, somehow manage to gather armies of supporters for their ideas. Their emails get answered, their calls get returned, their projects get funded, their ideas gain support. Being helpful isn't good if it makes you invisible. There's a special kind of shame in this realization. You've been playing a game of social connection, like a child randomly moving chess pieces, while others have been playing with the careful planning of experts. This pattern shows up in every area of your life. The promotion that went to someone less qualified but better connected. The client who chose a competitor despite your better proposal. The partner who drifted away despite all you put into the relationship. Take a breath. Let that sink in. Your kindness isn't the problem. Your blindness to how social debts really work. That's what's holding you back. What's truly crushing is how it slowly erodes your self-confidence. You begin to question your worth, your value, your place in society. You wonder if there's something deeply wrong with you, some invisible flaw that others can see, but you cannot. Who gets to decide your value in any room you enter? Right now, it's everyone but you. Drop a fire emoji in the comments if you felt this invisible ceiling, this frustrating barrier between yourself and the support, recognition, and chances you know you deserve. Your worth isn't set by your skills, but by your understanding of social debt. The hard truth is that most people will live their entire lives never understanding why some people easily collect allies supporters, and champions, while others, despite their talents and goodwill, remain constantly overlooked. In 1924, the anthropologist Marcel Mauss wrote a groundbreaking essay called The Gift. He explored a strange pattern he saw across countless human societies, from tribal communities in the Pacific Northwest to ancient Rome. What Mauss found was a universal social mechanism so basic to human interaction that it works without our awareness. The idea is simple. There is no such thing as a free gift. Every gift, favor, compliment, or act of service creates what Mauss called a total social fact, an invisible obligation that ties the receiver to the giver. Put simply, when you help someone, you create a debt they need to repay. This obligation isn't written down or spoken. It's psychological, emotional, and deeply rooted in our social DNA. The Kwakiutl tribes of the Pacific Northwest understood this principle so well that they built their entire social structure around it. Their famous potlatch ceremonies were elaborate displays where chiefs would give away, or sometimes even destroy, valuable goods. But this wasn't generosity for its own sake. Each gift created a debt that raised the giver's status and required payback, often with interest. Modern society hasn't gotten rid of this principle. We've just hidden it beneath a layer of business relationships and written contracts. But the invisible scorecard of social debts and credits works as strongly today as it did 10,000 years ago. Society taught you that keeping score is wrong, that teaching helps people who take without giving. Think about how this works in today's world. When a coworker helps you finish a project, they deposit social credit in your mental account. When your neighbor waters your plants while you're away, a debt is created. When someone remembers your birthday, recommends you for a job, or just listens carefully to your problems, each of these actions creates an entry in the invisible scorecard. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche took this idea even further in his study of morality. He argued that human relationships are basically lender-borrower relationships. To inspire fear, he wrote, to be able to practice terrible things upon others, this is how the powerful person proves his power. But there's a subtle twist on this power dynamic that Nietzsche only hinted at. The power to create pleasant obligations, helpful debts, and the quiet authority that comes not from being feared, but from being the silent architect of others' feelings of indebtedness. Pause for a moment. Think about who benefits when you believe it's petty to keep track of who owes you what. It's not you. It's the people who take without giving back. This is where most people misunderstand power. They think it comes from dominance, from being feared, from controlling resources. But the most lasting form of power, the kind that doesn't create resistance or rebellion, comes from being the hub of a wheel of carefully grown social debts. Robert Cialdini, in his landmark work on influence, identified what he called the rule of reciprocity as perhaps the most powerful principle of persuasion. When someone does something for us, we feel a nearly unstoppable urge to repay them. The discomfort of being in someone's debt is so powerful that we will often repay with something of greater value just to relieve ourselves of the mental burden. But here's what Cialdini only touched on. This principle can be used with surgical precision by those who understand how it works. The timing of the favor, its unexpectedness, its apparent selflessness, and its relevance to the recipient's immediate needs, all these factors amplify the psychological debt created. Power isn't controlling people. Power is becoming the person others feel they owe. What we're talking about isn't manipulation in the crude sense. It's a deep understanding of the invisible architecture of human relationships, an architecture that exists whether we acknowledge it or not. The invisible scorecard exists whether you recognize it or not. The only question is, are you consciously managing it, or are you its unconscious victim? Take a breath. Let that settle. Your options aren't manipulation or naivety. Your options are awareness or blindness, about a system that's already working in your life. Let's explore how social leverage points work, the specific moments and methods that allow you to create and collect on social debts without ever appearing manipulative or transactional. The first principle to understand is the difference in value. What costs you very little might be incredibly valuable to someone else. A 5-minute phone call to introduce 2 people in your network might cost you almost nothing, but could change both their lives. This difference creates maximum psychological debt with minimum investment. The most powerful favors cost you minutes, but save others months. Think about Jake, a mid-level manager who noticed a senior executive struggling with a presentation about new technologies. Jake spent 15 minutes helping the executive update his slides with more current information. The time investment was minimal for Jake, who kept up with tech trends as a hobby, but the value to the executive was huge. It potentially saved him from embarrassment in front of the board. 6 months later, when a position opened up in a coveted division, guess who the executive thought of first? The difference principle works because it allows you to create significant psychological debts without using up your own resources. The second principle is timing. A small favor delivered at exactly the right moment creates a far larger psychological debt than a major favor provided when it's just convenient. This is what I call the umbrella in the rainstorm effect. Offering someone an umbrella on a sunny day might get a polite "thank you." Offering that same umbrella the moment unexpected rain begins to fall creates a much stronger sense of gratitude and indebtedness. Maria understood this principle naturally. As a freelance designer, she noticed that most of her competitors sent holiday cards to past clients in December, when everyone sends cards. Maria instead kept notes on her clients' project launch dates and sent personalized congratulations exactly 1 year after each successful launch. This simple timing shift made her gestures stand out dramatically, deepening her client relationships and leading to a referral rate 3 times the industry average. A small favor at the perfect moment creates a debt that lasts for years. The third principle is the power of the unexpected. Expected favors create minimal psychological debt. It's the unexpected gesture that creates the strongest sense of obligation. Think about it. When your spouse cooks dinner on their night to cook, you appreciate it but feel minimal debt. But when they surprise you with your favorite meal after you've had a particularly hard day, the psychological impact is exponentially greater. James, a sales representative, applied this principle by sending thoughtful follow-up resources to prospects after meetings, not standard brochures or sales materials, but personalized articles, tools, or connections specifically relevant to a challenge the prospect had mentioned in passing. These unexpected, highly personalized gestures created significant psychological debt before any business relationship had even formally begun. But now, we must face the shadowy figure who lurks in the corner of this discussion, the manipulator. The manipulator understands these principles, but applies them with selfish intent, creating debt only to extract value, viewing relationships as purely transactional, and leaving people feeling used rather than valued. Take a breath. There's a big difference between understanding social physics and being exploitative. One creates mutual value. The other destroys trust. The key difference lies in your fundamental orientation toward others. Are you creating value first, with the confident knowledge that some of it will return to you through the natural operation of social physics? Or are you calculating each move solely based on what you can extract? You don't need to explain why you understand these principles. You don't need to apologize for finally learning the rules of a game everyone is already playing. Let me offer one empowering insight that will immediately change how you navigate social terrain. Start tracking and investing in what I call high-leverage relationships, connections with people who themselves have extensive networks, unusual resources, or specialized knowledge. One strong relationship with a well-connected individual can be worth dozens of relationships with isolated individuals, no matter how pleasant those people might be. This isn't about discarding people or being coldly calculating. It's about recognizing that your social energy is limited and being strategic about where you invest it. Some relationships naturally have higher potential leverage than others. Acknowledging this reality isn't heartless, it's honest. Take Amanda, a non-profit director who was struggling to raise funds for her organization. Rather than trying to reach wealthy donors directly, she identified and cultivated relationships with the assistants, advisors, and friends of philanthropists, the gatekeepers and influencers who could provide warm introductions. By creating small, meaningful debts with these connectors, offering relevant insights, making useful introductions within her own network, providing genuine value, she built a web of advocates who eventually opened doors that had previously been firmly closed. The most valuable connections aren't the ones with power, but the ones with access to power. You don't need to explain why you're selective about where you invest your social energy. The invisible scorecard demands conscious management, not random generosity. What identity have you built around your approach to relationships? Are you the helpful one, the giver, the supportive friend who prides yourself on being there for others without expectation? What if this identity, which feels so virtuous, is exactly what keeps you trapped in patterns of giving without receiving? There's a particular type of person who wears their indiscriminate helpfulness like a badge of honor. They say things like, "I just love helping people," or "I never keep score in relationships." On the surface, these sound like admirable sentiments. But dig deeper, and you'll often find someone who's afraid of being seen as selfish, afraid of stating their own needs, afraid of the directness required to shape relationships consciously rather than passively. Let that sit with you for a moment. Is your generosity sometimes rooted in fear rather than strength? What would happen if you shed this identity? If you acknowledge that every relationship has a scorecard, whether you choose to see it or not? Consider this uncomfortable question. Who benefits most from your belief that keeping track of social debts is somehow impure or wrong? Is it possible that this belief conveniently serves those who take from you without giving back? The people most upset when you wake up to these principles are often those who benefited most from your previous blindness to them. You don't need to explain why you finally recognize the patterns of one-way giving that have marked too many of your relationships. Another identity that keeps people trapped is what I call the meritocrat, the person who believes that if they simply do excellent work or be a good enough person, the right opportunities and connections will naturally come their way. This is perhaps the most devastating self-deception in modern professional life. The harsh reality is that your skills, talents, and even your character exist in a marketplace of attention and opportunity that is governed not just by merit, but by social capital. The finest violinist playing in a subway station will be ignored, while a mediocre performer on a prestigious stage receives a standing ovation. The difference isn't talent, it's context, positioning, and the invisible architecture of social validation. Pause and reflect on this truth. Excellence without strategy remains invisible. Who taught you that silent competence would be enough? That your work would speak for itself? That the right people would naturally discover and champion your talents? Your excellence means nothing without strategic visibility. You don't need to explain why you reject this passive approach to your own advancement. When you begin consciously managing the invisible scorecard, something unsettling happens. People who are comfortable with the old dynamic, where they received more than they gave, will often label you as different, distant, or even calculating. This is the resistance that comes with any shift in power dynamics. Ask yourself, when you began to value your time more carefully, who reacted with the most discomfort? When you became more selective about where and with whom you share your resources, who accused you of changing for the worse? The people most upset by your awakening to these principles are often those who benefited most from your previous blindness to them. Take a deep breath. Recognize that their discomfort is about them, not you. It's the natural resistance to a rebalancing of power, nothing more. You don't need to explain why you outgrow relationships that were fundamentally imbalanced. Your kindness, your helpfulness, your generosity, these good human qualities have been used against you by a society that celebrates giving while shaming the natural expectation of getting something back. What relationships in your life would change if you brought the invisible scorecard into the light? What conversations have you been avoiding about give and take and mutual support? Whose behavior would change if they realized you were now keeping track? You don't need to explain why you're finally playing a game you never agreed to play, but have been subject to your entire life. Return now to that moment I described at the beginning, the moment when someone asks you for a favor, and despite every logical reason to say no, you hear yourself saying yes. Imagine approaching that moment with a clear understanding of the invisible scorecard. You now recognize this request as a potential transaction in the social economy. You can assess, is there an existing debt this person has not yet repaid? What is the true cost to me in time, energy, and opportunity? What specific value might this create in our relationship? Is this person a high-leverage connection who warrants investment? This isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's the difference between being a conscious participant in the exchange of social value versus being an unconscious resource to be extracted from. Your generosity isn't smaller by being strategic, it's bigger by being conscious. Think about the relationships that have frustrated you most, where you've given and given without getting back. With your new understanding, you can see that the problem wasn't your generosity. It was that you never activated the natural human impulse toward reciprocity by making your contributions visible without boasting, creating comfortable opportunities for reciprocation, expressing appreciation when reciprocation occurs, gradually disengaging from chronically unbalanced relationships. Take a moment to reflect. Which relationships in your life need this kind of rebalancing? When you apply these principles, something remarkable happens. The right people, those capable of mutual investment and reciprocity, are drawn closer to you. Those accustomed to taking without giving will either adapt to the new reality or naturally drift away. Michael, a business consultant I worked with, had spent years freely sharing his expertise with colleagues who rarely returned his generosity. After learning these principles, he didn't suddenly become withholding. Instead, he became more intentional. When sharing valuable insights, he would casually mention, "I'd love to hear your thoughts on this project I'm working on next week." This simple pattern, giving value, then creating a specific, time-bound opportunity for reciprocation, transformed his professional network within months. Don't stop giving, just start collecting. The invisible scorecard isn't going anywhere. It's woven into human psychology, reinforced by millions of years of evolution as social creatures. The only question is whether you'll continue to be governed by it unconsciously, or whether you'll finally take the reins. You now understand that every interaction carries invisible debts and credits. Every conversation, every favor, every moment of attention or support, all of these create entries in a scorecard that most people never learn to read. The transformation available to you isn't about becoming transactional or manipulative. It's about becoming conscious where you were once unconscious, intentional where you were once accidental, and empowered where you were once passive. Comment below with the phrase, "I claim my social value." This isn't just a comment. It's a declaration that you're stepping into a new relationship with the invisible social economy that surrounds you. It's an acknowledgement that you're no longer willing to give endlessly without the natural flow of reciprocity that sustains all healthy human connections. This understanding of social leverage points is just the beginning of what I call practical Machiavellianism, the art of applying ancient wisdom about human nature to create real advantages in your modern life without compromising your integrity. In the coming weeks, I'll be exploring the complementary principles that build on what you've learned today. How to create perceived scarcity around your time and attention, dramatically increasing their value in others' eyes. The selective vulnerability technique that creates instant rapport and trust while revealing nothing that could be used against you. The counterintuitive power of the request, why asking for specific favors in the right way at the right time actually increases your perceived value. How to identify and neutralize social vampires who systematically create debt without reciprocation. Take a moment. Ask yourself, what relationships would transform if you applied just one principle from today? Your worth isn't measured by how much you give. It's measured by how strategically you give. If you're ready to continue this journey of social mastery, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Unlike channels that offer vague platitudes or manipulative tricks, this series is about developing a deep understanding of social dynamics that creates genuine win-win relationships while ensuring you're never again the person who gives without receiving. The principles I share aren't just theories. They're battle-tested strategies I've used to build connections with world-class performers, gain access to closed networks, and create opportunities that seemed impossible just a few years ago. Subscribe now if you're ready to transform how you navigate every social interaction, every relationship, and every opportunity to exchange value with others. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming the most effective, respected, and strategically connected version of yourself. There's a question that will follow you into the quiet moments after you close this video. What exchanges of value are happening around you right now, invisible only because you've chosen not to see them? The coworker who always seeks your advice, but is mysteriously unavailable when you need theirs. The friend who absorbs your emotional support, but somehow never has the capacity to hold space for your struggles. The family member who happily receives your assistance, but meets your requests with sighs and reluctance. These aren't random patterns. They aren't temporary imbalances that will naturally fix themselves. They are the predictable outcomes of unconscious participation in a game whose rules others have long understood. Think back to that moment when someone asks you for a favor, and despite every logical reason to say no, you hear yourself saying yes. That moment isn't just about kindness. It's about power, visibility, and the invisible architecture of human connection. Tonight, as you scroll through your messages, as you consider the requests in your inbox, as you think about the relationships that drain rather than sustain you, remember that the invisible scorecard never stops recording. Each time you say yes without reciprocation, each time you give without receiving, each time you extend yourself for someone who doesn't extend themselves for you, an entry is made. The scorecard doesn't judge. It doesn't care about your intentions or your hopes. It simply records the flow of value, who provides it, who receives it, who reciprocates, who doesn't. Your awakening begins not with big confrontations or radical changes, but with the quiet recognition of what has always been true. Every human interaction carries a cost and creates a debt. To pretend otherwise isn't virtuous. It's self-deception. Tomorrow, someone will ask something of you. In that moment, you'll face a choice that goes far beyond yes or no. You'll choose whether to remain a passive participant in exchanges designed by others, or to finally become the conscious architect of your own social value. The invisible scorecard awaits your attention. Will you finally learn to read it?